People break with a scream. I broke with a click. The sound of my laptop closing as his voice echoed from the conference stage, amplified for the thousands in the auditorium and the tens of thousands watching the live stream. It's a shame my original partner couldn't keep up, he said, but vision requires sacrifice. Sometimes you have to trim the dead weight to let the tree grow. The spotlight caught the shine on his $1,000 Italian shoes, a perfect, blinding white circle on the dark stage. It looked like a prophet, a self-made god of innovation. I was in the third row, a ghost at my own funeral. Next to me, my lawyer, Ms. Vance, gave my hand a slight squeeze. I leaned over and whispered my only response. He just signed the final affidavit. Quinn and I met in the chaotic glow of a 24-hour hackathon, fueled by stale coffee and the frantic energy of creation. I was the coder, the architect behind the screen. He was the designer, the visionary who could sell an idea with a napkin sketch and a killer smile. We built the prototype for Viridian, our sustainable living app, in a single weekend. One of our first real memories together was after winning, sitting on the hood of my beat-up Toyota, sharing a cheap bottle of champagne as the sun came up over Austin, mapping our future on a fogged-up windshield. That felt safe. First red flag was 2 months later when he presented our app to a small angel investor and said I stayed up all night coding this feature, when it had been my fingers on the keyboard, my logic, my breakthrough. I dismissed it. He was the showman, I told myself. We needed his confidence. The first year was our golden period. We secured $50,000 in seed funding and moved into a trendy co-working space called Forge. We celebrated with dinner at Uche, ordering everything on the menu. We spent long nights working side by side, him refining the user interface on his Wacom tablet, me building the complex backend that made it all work. The balance began to shift so slowly I almost didn't notice. My contributions were 80-hour work weeks and my personal savings covering server overages. His were networking lunches at expensive restaurants and subscriptions to obscure European design magazines, all expensed. He started calling me the engine room. You keep the ship moving, Zara, he'd say. I'll steer us to the promised land. He was taking, I was giving, and I rationalized it as the division of labor. First crack in my denial came not from a bang, but from a whisper. I was grabbing a water from the shared kitchen at Forge and saw his laptop screen angled just so, an email chain with a pat attorney. The subject line was, Viridian IP's sole founder vesting. My blood went cold. He wasn't steering the ship. He was planning a mutiny. That night, I started my own secret project. For 12 weeks, I became an archaeologist of our partnership. I used a simple script to download and archive our entire Slack history. I meticulously documented my GitHub commits, 92% of the Viridian codebase, all timestamped. I cross-referenced the company's QuickBooks with my personal bank statements, highlighting the $8,450 I'd personally spent on cloud services he'd promised to repay. Each new piece of evidence widened the scope of his betrayal. It wasn't just stealing an idea. He was trying to erase my existence. Just as I thought I had it all figured out, he staged a masterful piece of emotional theater. He called a late-night meeting, his face a mask of regret. He confessed he'd been talking to lawyers to protect the company from future disputes. Investors get nervous about 50-50 splits, he said, his voice heavy with false sincerity. He proposed a new operating agreement. He'd be CEO with a 70% stake, and I'd be CTO with 30%. It's just a title, Zara, he assured me. This makes us look stronger. Exhausted and desperate to believe there was still something to save, I told him I'd think about it. It was a lie. I was no longer saving our company. I was building my case. The breaking point arrived via a livestream link. It was the Future Forward Tech Summit, and Quinn was a keynote speaker. He walked onto the stage to thunderous applause and announced a $25 million Series A funding round led by a top-tier venture capital firm. He unveiled the new Viridian logo, the one I designed. He demoed the seamless backend performance, the one I coded. My name was never mentioned. During the Q&A, a tech journalist named Tess Pinda asked him about the company's origins, about his first collaborator. Quinn smiled that same killer smile from the hood of my Toyota. Zara was a talented coder, a great support in the early days, he said, his voice smooth as polished glass. But she lacked the commercial vision. The project outgrew her. It's a harsh reality of innovation. Some people are just the scaffolding, not the final building. Scaffolding. The word hung in the air. For a full minute, I couldn't breathe. My entire world froze on that one, brutal metaphor. As his face filled the screen, I noticed a tiny, overlooked detail on his presentation slide behind him. In the bottom right corner was a faint watermark, an intricate geometric pattern I had designed as a placeholder in our very first prototype. He was so arrogant, so dismissive of my work, he hadn't even bothered to build his grand presentation from scratch. Just built it on top of mine. That was the moment the plan solidified. He hadn't just given me the motive. He'd given me the murder weapon. My first call was to Ms. Vance, a notoriously sharp intellectual property lawyer whose retainer cost me the last $15,000 of my savings. She was methodical, unemotional, and exactly what I needed. She laid out the timeline, 6 months of preparation. We gathered my evidence into a fortress of facts. The 412, timestamped GitHub commits. 1,287 Slack messages where Quinn admitted his technical ignorance, with lines like, "I don't get the database stuff. You're the magician." We had bank statements, server logs, and even the original hackathon registration form listing me as lead developer. An ironic coincidence strengthened our case. The hackathon's official photographer had taken a picture of me, exhausted but smiling, holding up the whiteboard with the app's initial architecture sketched out. My handwriting was unmistakable. One afternoon, I got a call from Quinn's new assistant, asking for a legacy password to an old Oz server. I knew instantly he was trying to delete the early backups. That was our close call. I gave her a fake password, hung up, and told Vance we needed to accelerate our timeline. Our strategy was a quiet trap. Vance sent Quinn's new corporate lawyers a low-threat cease and desist letter, focusing only on a minor user interface element. As predicted, they dismissed it as the petty grievance of a disgruntled former collaborator, making him feel untouchable. It was the perfect decoy, leading him willingly into the slaughterhouse. The final meeting was staged in the sterile, glass-walled boardroom of his new venture capital firm. The partners were there, looking annoyed but obligated to perform due diligence. Quinn strode in, radiating confidence. He leaned back in his chair, a king in his court. I sat opposite him, with Ms. Vance by my side. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I'm here to discuss the ownership of my intellectual property." Quinn laughed. He told the VC partners this was a pathetic shakedown and a waste of their valuable time. He was still laughing when Ms. Vance connected her laptop to the room's massive 8K display. The first wave of evidence was the financials and the GitHub analysis, displayed in stark, undeniable charts. 92% of core code, 84% of bug fixes, all linked to my developer ID. The room went silent. Quinn's smile faltered. The second wave was the kill shot. Vance played the video of his keynote speech, pausing on the word scaffolding. Then she pulled up the presentation slide and zoomed in, the image pixelating until the faint, ghost-like watermark filled the screen. Next to it, she opened my original Adobe Illustrator file from 18 months prior, its metadata clearly visible. A perfect match. Quinn began to stammer, talking about how vision and leadership were the real value, not just lines of code. The head VC, a woman with ice water in her veins, just stared at him. I let the silence hang for a moment before delivering my final line. It's hard to have a vision when you're using someone else's eyes. The next 24 hours were a controlled demolition. The VC firm immediately invoked the material misrepresentation clause in their term sheet, pulling the $25 million funding. Their internal investigation was swift and brutal. Within a week, the story was on every major tech blog, framed as a cautionary tale of stolen valor. Viridian's scandal was trending. Quinn's carefully curated world imploded. The settlement was swift and quiet. I received a wire transfer for $1.2 million, and more importantly, the uncontested ownership of the Viridian source code. The VCs clawed back their seed money, forcing Quinn into personal bankruptcy. His new investors, his new friends, his entire network, they all vanished. The last I saw of him was a photo a friend sent me months later. He was working as a freelance brand strategist, his LinkedIn profile picture a poorly lit selfie taken in what looked like a grim, beige apartment. The Italian shoes were gone. I moved to Portland. I sold the Viridian code to a larger competitor for a sum that ensures I'll never have to worry about money again. But I don't live lavishly. I bought a modest loft with good light, I brew my own coffee, and I spend most of my time mentoring young women in STEM, helping them navigate the treacherous early stages of their careers. The calm I feel isn't from the money, it's the quiet satisfaction of a problem solved, of a system restored to balance. Last week, a young coder I'm mentoring sent me an email after landing her first major project. It read, "Thank you for everything. You were the scaffolding that let me build this." The word didn't sting. It was a badge of honor. He built his empire on my foundation, and in the end, that's all he left me with, a solid place to stand.